Hey y'all, what is going on? What is going on? It's your girl, Melba Pearson, Melba for Miami, Melba for Justice, also known as the resident legal diva. And it is time for another Mondays with Melba. Hope everyone is doing well. The news cycle has been real heavy in the last few days. We've recently discovered that State Attorney Monique Worrell has been removed from her position, suspended from her position as duly elected state attorney for the Orlando Osceola area. There's going to be actions for folks to be able to mobilize and fight back against this. So I'll make sure to keep everybody posted as more information becomes available. I've also done a TikTok on the topic. So if you're over on TikTok, or if you want to check out my Facebook page and as well as my Instagram pages, I have it up there. Just a little bit of an explainer as to the background and why this is so dangerous. But pivoting to our amazing guest today, which, I mean, timing is everything, right? And just look at how fate and faith and everything works. Allahandro Bradford is launching a brand new PAC here in Florida designed to help, Black folks and people of color, millennials, younger folks to be able to get involved and get elected here in the state of Florida. So Allahandro, thank you so much for coming on Mondays with Melba.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about what we're doing. It's important work, and I know we're going to get into it, but to have a platform to talk about what we're doing is so incredibly important. So, yeah. And go Monique, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, this was hard. I mean, I know I'm centering kind of the discussion talking about that just because I think it exemplifies how important it is for us on the ground to support folks, not only just go out to vote, which is number one, basic, that's our starting point. We could be voting in every single election, but holding folks accountable for, taking her out of office. Because again, at the end of the day, listen, if 30,000 more folks came out to vote in 2018, we would have had Andrew Cuomo as governor, and we would not be dealing with this foolishness right now. So, but I'm going to stop talking about that for now. I'll talk about it probably again later. Allahandro, tell everybody about yourself and your background and, why you're so drawn to electoral politics.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My name is Allahandro. I am a 12-year organizer here in the state of Florida. I cut my teeth during President Barack Obama's re-election campaign as a freshman student at Florida A&M University. I always say the first election I could vote in, I worked in. And so, I started organizing in that election, and I just fell in love with organizing. The idea that people could get together, organize themselves, and actually make something happen was just like, whoa, this is amazing. And so following that, I went into movement organizing with the Dream Defenders, and we did the Capitol takeover. And my passion has always been just organizing to help Black people. That's what I've been all about for my entire career. I've been fortunate enough to become the caucus director at the House Caucus, the political director at the Senate Caucus. I'm the only African-American in the state of Florida to lead both chambers of the Florida legislature for political department. So it's a pretty big accomplishment, and I've had an opportunity to really learn how this business works. And that's why I know that these gaps exist, and that's why I was so passionate about bringing the Black Florida Action Fund to life. So, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about it. What is the goal of the Black Florida Action Fund? And can you give a little explainer on how a political action committee works, a PAC? I mean, we always hear the term PAC, but not everybody knows its purpose and how powerful it can be, especially for, grassroots elections.
Absolutely. So the Black Florida Action Fund is a political action committee, as you have described. What makes political action committees unique is that it is the only vehicle in the state of Florida that can accept unlimited contributions, and it can engage directly in political campaigns. And that's different from your 501c3 organizations that maybe your churches or different charitable organizations may be. And then your 501c4 organizations like the NAACP, Faith in Florida, those organizations are C4. They're here for social welfare. They're not supposed to directly engage in politics. Whereas a political action committee, you can get right into the nuts and bolts of politics. You can directly engage with candidates. You can give them money, unlimited sums of money. And that's the work that we need to do here in the state of Florida. I know we're going to get into that a bit, but as it exists right now, there is no place for Black candidates to go and get the support that a political action committee could give them. And that's not the truth. That's not true for other communities. We as a community, as Black people in this state, we have a real big gap in our infrastructure, and that's what I see. And so that's why we're creating the Black Florida Action Fund.
Awesome. So, so you mentioned that you saw these gaps and in terms of engagement, in terms of places for Black folks to go. And of course, as someone who, ran for office, again, the women have roofs list. If you're, a new generation, next gen candidate under the age of like 30, there's a few different PACs you can go to for financial support. But, in terms of if you are just a Black candidate, there's no place for you to go. So can you talk a little bit more about how the Florida Black Action Fund is going to kind of help address this gap, and what kind of services would you be able to provide to candidates who are like, hey, I want to run, so I call Allahandro, what do I do now? What
exactly
happens?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. If you are a woman, you can go to Roofless. They do incredible work over there. If you are LGBTQ, you can go to Equality Florida. They do incredible work. If you are a conservationist, you can go to Legal Conservation Voters, and they'll support you. There is no place right now for Black people and Black candidates to go and get financial support, even any kind of support, really. The reality is that these candidates that you see who get elected and get supported, they don't pop out of thin air, right? These are people who get recruited, they get promised things to come into the race, to get involved, and they get supported for the entirety of their campaign. And that's the work I did at the Senate caucus and the House caucus when I was there. And that's why, I mentioned that. What I would do, my job as political director for the Senate caucus, was to go and first find candidates. I would talk to the Florida Justice Association. I would talk to the FEA. I would talk to the conservation voters. I would talk to Roofless. I would talk to everyone recruiting and say, hey, is there a candidate that you want to be the person in this different seat? And they would say, okay, yeah, we like this person. There's a teacher over here. We like them. And we're willing to put $250,000 to help them become the consensus candidate. There isn't a place like that for Black people in the state of Florida. And so that gap exists right now. And sort of what we want to do with the Black Florida Action Fund is to, one, be able to fund candidates, to recruit them, right? So I hear a lot of times people say, I don't like the candidates who are running. They don't stand for what I stand for. Well, you can do something about that. You can go and recruit your own candidate. You can put money behind them, and then you help them win their race. And so that's the work we're focused on: recruiting, training, and supporting Black candidates, and then mobilizing the voters to get to the polls and get them elected. And I'll tell you, Melba, I was talking to some of our grassroots activists in Miami-Dade about what we're doing, and they mentioned you by name, as a matter of fact. They said, this is a person who shares our values, and we've got to get some support behind her. And I agree with that. I mean, you are an incredible legal mind. You're an incredible person. And if you get the support that you need to be successful, I believe you'll make an incredible elected official. So.
Thank you. That's really sweet. Thank you. I appreciate it. And of course, I'm taking a whole lot of things under advisement right now. But, the flip side is too, though, that, making that decision to run for office is an incredibly heavy decision for most people, but I think even more so for people of color, because again, you're thinking about finances, you're thinking about impact, and then you've got to think about racism, right? Like, are you ready to receive a noose in the mail? Are you ready to have your life threatened by the Proud Boys? Are you ready to, have to take alternate routes around, especially if you're viewed to be a threat to certain power structures, right? Like if you're running for office in a Black community, you may not have the same issues. If you're running for office in a more diverse community or a more white community, there may be folks who are not happy about your presence. So how do you kind of help the candidates navigate through that decision-making process?
Yeah, I think, and that's the work I did at the Senate caucus for the better part of a decade. I think what you've got to do as a candidate, smart candidates do this, is one, you inventory the landscape, right? It's who's going to help me, who's around, who believes in what I'm doing, who's going to financially support me, and do I have the ability to win in the district? And I think you have to ask those questions. That comes down to in some cases, you've got to do a poll. And a lot of these organizations do polls and say, hey, you've got a 30% name ID in this district, you should definitely run. Or, hey, you only 3% of people know you, maybe you should pick another district. That also looks like, again, inventorying, right? So it's like, we've got $100,000 over here, we've got $50,000 over here. What can you put together in the initial stages of a campaign to make you look viable? And that's the secret, right? That's the secret. I tell people this all the time. When we talk about, for instance, I'll talk about state leg because I have a lot of experience there. If you run for the state Senate in a competitive seat, that's going to be a $3 to $5 million race. Now, you don't have to raise $3 to $5 million. You probably only have to raise about 700,000 of that, right? And even of the 700,000, you probably actually only have to have $250,000 in your personal network. The rest of it is sort of money you attract by being a viable candidate. You raise money early. People say, okay, this person is the person who's likely going to win. Let me give my money to them. But candidates have a hard time, especially Black candidates, have a hard time putting those initial numbers up because, as you know, every single month, you're going to report to the Division of Elections, and donors, people who are supporters, they're going to be looking at that sheet and say, is this person raising any money? Do they have a chance in God's green earth of winning? And if you don't have any money in that account, the answer is no, and they're not going to support you. It's going to be harder for you to get support. So when you're looking to raise those initial funds, it's like, okay, how can we put together some money early in your campaign to make you look viable so that when we go to bigger donors, we're able to get you the support that you need to get to that $750,000. And once you get there, the rest of the money sort of comes from the infrastructure. But our candidates have a hard time getting that first part done. And so they never actually see the support from the infrastructure. And that's what we're trying to fix here.
Yeah, because I mean, it's true. Money begets money, right?
Yes.
So that's why you always want to come out the gate with strong, your first month is like, boom, like a nice size amount of money, and then kind of hold on in the second month. That's and then that gets people thinking, oh, wow, this person really is making a splash. Let me see how I can support, and sometimes big donors will stay out the race almost until the end because they want to see how you're able to perform over time. So that does become a challenge.
Let me say this. Sorry to cut you off, but there's no candidate who has $750,000 in their network. That's not a thing, right? And I've seen this firsthand. A candidate goes and they raise $100,000 from their network, and then the FJA or the FEA or somebody kicks in another $50,000, and these candidates look strong. They get all these reports and these articles about how great their fundraising is, and now they're the leading candidate. Well, they're the leading candidate because people have put resources behind them. And if you're a Black candidate, you just don't have that right now. So that's why we're working on the Black Florida Action Fund.
And so you had mentioned something before that I wanted to follow up on about surveying the political landscape, right? So in your estimation, again, we've talked a little bit about what's going on with Monique Worrell. We've talked about, some of the struggles that Black candidates face. But looking at the political landscape right now, where do you see that there's opportunities and, how can folks kind of connect with that, right? Because again, you're hearing this oppressive news coming out of Tallahassee. People out here in the rest of the country think that Black Floridians are just laying down and doing nothing, right? So there's that narrative that we're trying to correct. Like, no, folks have been speaking out. Right. But, where do you see the opportunities?
Absolutely. I think so. We know right now that the Florida legislature, Republicans have a supermajority in both the House and the Senate. And we saw what that looks like in this last legislative session, where they just pretty much did whatever they wanted to do. They passed some things that are, I think, more extreme than we are as a state. And I think some of it is coming back to bite them, but personally not enough. But we have an opportunity, one, in the Florida House. We can cut that super majority. We can get rid of that. I think we have to pick up about 4 seats to get out of the super minority for Democrats. And that's a place where I think we're gonna be focusing a lot on finding House seats that we can flip from either red to blue, or whatever, to being Democrat or to not being red, and getting Republicans out of the supermajority so that we have some checks and balances in the legislative system to stop some of this stuff coming out of Tallahassee. Additionally, we have a number of local candidates that we really should be paying attention to. And I think Monique Worrell is a perfect example of how locally people you elect can have a direct impact on your life. And let's really dig into what Monique is being, or Attorney Worrell is being suspended for. It is because she refused to hand down harsh penalties to people who are being criminalized for marijuana. As a community, that's what we've said we wanted. And that's why they elected her, right? They wanted people who are going to not throw the book at people who have a marijuana charge. And she's doing exactly that. They voted for her to do that. And now we have a governor who has decided, okay, well, I'm going to, just override what the voters in that area have decided to do and suspend her. And we'll see if the Senate decides to remove her. I have no reason to believe they won't. But, when we look at our legislative seats, when we look at our local seats like state attorney, I know that in Palm Beach, we have the first Black woman running for state attorney, Alexia Cox. So, we want to make sure people, and I know Alexia personally, she's somebody who hangs out at the local restaurants. It's somebody you can walk up to and say, hey, Alexia, here's my issue. Here's what I think. And we want people who are connected to community to be in these positions, because when something happens, you want to be able to pick up the phone and call them. And so I think in the state attorney's races, we have a couple of opportunities there throughout the state. In Miami-Dade, there's an opportunity to elect a Black sheriff. It's the first ever election for a sheriff. There's an opportunity to potentially elect a Black sheriff. Up and down the state, we have a lot of local opportunities, county commission opportunities. We have to pay attention to these school board races now. We've got folks doing crazy stuff in the school board. And so we have to make sure that we put people on our school board who are not going to fall in line with these crazy standards and say, no. I saw Leon County yesterday. They put out a statement saying that they will be teaching AP psychology in its entirety. They're not going to be cutting out anything. And so that shows you the power of your local school board to say, we're not going to do that. And for Black people, we need to put people on the school board who are going to say, no, we're not going to do that. So lots of opportunities.
No, and that's great to hear, because again, I think we forget that in the chaos, right? Yeah. We forget that there's gems of hope. Like you think about Donna Deegan getting elected mayor in Jacksonville, there's progress to be made. It's just a matter of giving them the support and also voting as a block, right? So when you're thinking about, okay, who am I voting for mayor, but then also who am I voting for on my city commission or my city council? Who am I voting for sheriff? Because again, all of their roles intersect, and they may have the ability to block progress or to support progress. So we have to have a very 360 view on all the different seats that are up for election. So
100%. And let me just say, in that, it is not just that we need to vote as a block, right? We need to come to these folks and support them and say, in exchange for our support, here's what we'd like to see you do. I think it's important that we stop telling people, especially Black people, to go out and vote just because you need to vote. We've got to clearly define what it is that we want, and we've got to make that ask and say, hey, here's what we want you to do, and here's how we're willing to support you if you give us what we want. That's what everybody else is doing, and that's the work that we've got to get involved in. So,
absolutely. So with that, let's talk a little bit about how folks can get involved. So you're launching the Black Florida Action Fund. What's next? How can people get involved? Can they donate? Does it have to be a particular candidate, or how does that work for people? What are the nuts and bolts of how they can support?
Yeah, so very excited to allow people to donate and bring this to people. We are a grassroots political organization. We are not intended to be something owned and controlled by corporate interests or special interests. We are the people on the ground fighting for the people on the ground. And so we rely on donations to do our work, quite frankly. So you can go to Black Florida PC, so BLACK Florida PC, and .com, and you can donate. It's really important that you support the cause. And I'll say this, it's not just about how much money you can donate. If you don't have $10,000, that's fine. If you have $5, if you have $3, whatever you have, that's the work that you can give that and you can support. Also on our website, blackfloridapc.com, you can go ahead and sign up to volunteer. And that's important. We have a goal of executing 10,000 shifts. And that's important because I think sometimes, like you said earlier, we think voting is the end all be all of this process. And that's just not the case. You've got to vote, you've got to volunteer, you've got to donate, you've got to get involved. Politics is a full contact sport. So if you want to see change in your community, what we're doing with the Black Florida Action Fund is giving you a way to funnel that change, right? So you can come here, you can donate your money, and we'll make sure it gets to your local candidates. You can volunteer, we'll make sure that you have a seamless process and that you're volunteering for people who believe in what you believe in and who are ready to fight for you as a constituency. So.
Love it. Love it. Okay. And so for everybody watching, just know that I'm going to drop the link in the comments or in the description of the show. So that way, if you weren't able to scribble it down, I got you covered, right? But it's just really important that we engage and just remember, we got to vote in every single election and we have to stay engaged in what's happening in between elections because we can't catch amnesia and forget that this particular representative voted, in favor of, some of these book bans or the Anti-Woke Act or
Can I interject? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
It's not only just that we can't forget, right? We can do something offensively, right? We can go and say, I'm going to recruit a candidate against you. I'm going to fund them and I'm going to make sure you don't have an easy time getting back in office. It's about going on offense, making things happen for ourselves. So.
I 1,000% agree because that's what other folks do. That's how all these moms for liberty are showing up on school boards. This is the machinations that have been going on for literally since the beginning of our democracy. We're just getting in the game now. So we got to catch up.
That's right.
We can run fast. We got our ancestors pushing us, so we can run fast.
Did you see Alabama? We can definitely run.
We can listen. We can swim, we can run, and we can come squad deep.
Hello.
If you know, you know. So with that, Allahandro, thank you so much for joining us on Mondays with Melba. Thank you so much for your work in this space because it's just critical for us to stay educated, stay woke, and stay involved. So definitely look forward to having you back on again to talk about the progress that you've been able to make and also talk about some of the amazing candidates you're going to be supporting for the next electoral cycle for folks to get behind.
Thank you, Melba. Thank you so much. And thank you to your viewers. Have a good day.
Awesome. Thank you. And y'all, thank you for tuning in. Like, comment, share, and we will see you next week for another episode. Take care. Bye.